Hello, hello. Hey, there's the mic. Cool. Say hello to my friend Bert. Bert travels around with me. He's a co-presenter, as it were. Is this your phone? Those are cool pictures. No, just kidding. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everyone today? Oh, wait a minute. Come on. How is everyone today? Very good. Okay, there we go. We got to make sure we have a little bit of energy there. I'm just worried about where to put. That seems a little spongy. We'll see. Stay. It's great to be here today. I appreciate it. We're going to talk a little bit about IXPs and why enterprise organizations should peer. I will wander around a little bit here on stage just because the camera folks need something to entertain them with. Just kidding. But more importantly, the only thing I ask is if you have questions, please ask them. If you want to ask a question in the middle of my presentation, raise your hand, wave, do something. We'll see if we can get a mic over to you. Let's wait for the mic guys to get over there just so that our remote folks can hear the question as too. If not, I'll try to repeat the question back. So, I have this as one of my normal slides. I do sometimes presentations where cybersecurity and confidentiality is important. This presentation is TLP clear. If you don't know what traffic light protocol is or what TLP is, go to first.org. If you want to take pictures, feel free to take pictures. The slide deck will be available. I assume it's up on the LINX website after the presentations, however that is. If you still want a copy, find me, give me a business card. I'll be happy to send you a copy. So, quick agenda. Who am I? We're going to talk a little bit about peering in transit, what exchange points are, why peering. I think those things many of you already have a good understanding of. So we'll probably go through those fairly quickly. This is a presentation that I do not only in organizations or events where peering is everybody gets it, but also in some organizations where there's lots of new folks coming in that are still sort of scratching their head trying to figure out why we care. We're going to talk about the importance of peering from a network operations perspective, which again I think many of you will understand, but also from a security perspective. And we're going to focus a little bit more on enterprises as opposed to service providers, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into it. I've got a little example of why peering would have helped some folks in Amsterdam a few years ago, and then we'll go into questions and answers. So, who am I? My name is John Brown. I'm a CISSP and a commercial multi-engine pilot. I fly airplanes when I'm not pushing packets. Both of them are really fun things to do. I've been doing this for a couple of years. I ran ICANN's LRoot server right after ICANN got started. So for those of you that might know John Crane and others, I had the great privilege of working with him and some other folks there. My email address is at the bottom. Feel free to spam me if you want. Ask me anything, ask me questions. I'm always looking for feedback. If there's something we can help you with from the Team Cymru Outreach group, more than happy to jump in. The marketing people make me do these slides, so please don't shoot me. So who is Team Cymru? Does anybody in here know who Team Cymru is? Raise your hand if you know who Team Cymru is. Okay, so we got a pretty good mix. We're a 15, 20 years old organization. We provide threat intelligence information. We provide cybersecurity services that are no cost for ISPs and hosting companies. We work with a whole bunch of CSIRTs in various countries. Our no-cost community services are the Nimbus threat monitoring tools, our DDoS mitigation tool called Utters, Bogons, routes that you shouldn't be able to get to on the internet. And that's not just your classical RFC 1918 kind of space. That's also address blocks that a RIR would have in reserve or is currently, they've reclaimed or waiting on it before they issue it back out. We'll have those in our databases because those currently right now are not allocated or assigned to anyone. CSIRT, if you happen to be a national level CSIRT organization, we have services available for you there. We provide a lot of different information in the CERT world. We have 4 conferences per year. which are invite-only cybersecurity, no sales, no media, no presentations, as far as a sales kind of event. If you're interested in attending those, let me know. I'll be happy to get you an invite. They're technical in nature. We have about 20 to 30% law enforcement, and the rest are internet security, academic, research, operators, etc. Personally, I would encourage, if you have an interest in network security on your network, come to our events. They're free. There's no cost to register or come to the event other than your own travel costs. Our next one is in Mexico in May, and then after that we'll be in Prague in early September. Normally we're at the Council of Europe in September. Excuse me. We have a number of webinars we do. If you want to talk more about stuff, we can jump on a call. Dragon News Bites is our news feed of security events and security news. We vet it to make sure that this isn't just some other reporter not getting their facts straight on a boring article. We try to push out real articles and real information that might be operationally relevant to folks in the community. So there, that's effectively who we are. We're about 170 employees based worldwide. So we're a fairly decent sized organization. Now, let's talk a little bit about transit and peering. Please bear with me. I know pretty much every one of you in here knows what I'm about to talk about, but I like to set the playing field to make sure we're all sort of on the same page as far as terms and what have. Transit. Transit, you're paying somebody else to carry all your packets somewhere. Their job is to get you to the internet and back. As a baby ISP, when you're first starting, you bought transit from somebody, and they took you to the rest of the world. If you're an enterprise organization, if you're HSBC, your Standard Charter, ABN AMRO, Rabobank, fill in the blank. If you're an enterprise organization, you're typically buying transit, right? And your transit provider is responsible for getting you to and from the internet. Enterprises is where I hope to try to break that, and I hope that you guys can help break that model as well. Enterprises should be peering, and that's a spoiler alert. What is peering? Well, peering is pretty simple. It's because Mike here and I have traffic that we send back and forth, but I'm sending it via that guy over there, right? And he sends it up to him, who sends it over to her, who sends it back to Mike. And as we all understand here at an exchange point, peering is Mike and I decide to drag a cable between us, exchange our routing information so that any traffic I have going towards Mike goes to him, any traffic he has from his network coming to my network comes across to me. There is no expectation that Mike is going to take me to the rest of the internet unless I'm paying for it via a transit or we have some other special arrangement. When I used to run an ISP, I did some peering with folks in the middle of nowhere, rural areas where there was no chance they would ever get peering anywhere else because they were in the middle of nowhere. I would actually transport them and help them get to an exchange point across my network if they wanted to build a tunnel and buy a port on an exchange, let's say out at Los Angeles at NE2IX or one of the IBXs, et cetera. I would do that just because it would help their network. And I just was looking for a cost recovery. Peering requires BGP protocol. It's our signaling protocol that we use to announce routes. But we also use BGP for sort of other signaling too, right? We can use it for remote triggered black hole. We can use it to signal firewall rules with flow spec, stuff along those lines. So BGP is the signaling protocol that we use for controlling how our network routes packets. Peering is typically established from a direct connection. If I have 100 peers in the old days, if I had 100 folks I wanted to connect to, that meant I had to drag 100 different circuits, and that became not scalable. So that's why we have LINX, right? Because LINX solves that scale problem. LINX allows us, whether on London 1 or London 2, or on both, or any of the other myriad of LINX instances around the globe now, that gives you the ability to connect to one location, and then that location fans you out to everybody else. Whether you're part of a multilateral environment because you're connecting to a route server, or you're building a bilateral across the Exchange fabric, you can do that through that aggregation. And instead of having to have connectivity going into Telehouse and Docklands and Manchester and Slough and everywhere else, you can go into one point on a fabric, and that fabric will then take you elsewhere into the ecosystem. So typically IXPs like LINX are going to be, as you know, going to be inside of an exchange point, inside of a data center co-location kind of facility. Why peer? Why peer? Pardon? Don't buy transit, right? So what is that doing for you? Works well for me. Yep, saves you money, right? It saves you money, it improves, reduces latency, reduces hop cost. It also, I would say, these are all the really great geeky reasons why you peer, okay? But for you biz dev and biz operations and finance folks, there's a whole set of reasons here why you want to peer and why you want to allow your network to peer. And those reasons become even more important if you're an enterprise network. Your router has a direct connection, traffic doesn't go across, we improve latency and enhance customer experience, so forth. We'll talk about some of this here in a second. So for NetOps, security ops. Typically, as I said at the beginning, enterprises look at themselves as an enterprise network. My belief is today there is a blurring of that line. It used to be a fairly bright line between, hi, I'm HSBC, I'm a bank, I'm going to buy transit from BT or whomever it is, and they're responsible. My networking guys are responsible for making that happen. Okay. But now HSBC, just to grab a local name, has an app, right? I didn't bring my mobile. Oh well, normally I have my mobile. They have a mobile phone, they have an app. And that's now a service. They're providing that service on that mobile device, or on your iPad, or on your laptop. They want you to be able to do banking online with them. Well, who's carrying the traffic for that mobile operator? That mobile operator is probably, whether it's T-Mobile, it's Vodafone, it's Orange, O2, fill in the blank. Many of those operators are at an exchange point today because it makes sense for them from a network perspective. Well, to me, it makes sense for many enterprises to now be at that exchange point as well, because the traffic from a mobile device can now go across the exchange and over to the mobile operator's network, or over to the bank or other organization that's connected there. However, when I've talked with banks, their general answer is that their IT departments buy transit. This is the way it's always been done, so that's what we're going to do. Let's change that. When there's a networking problem, it's the ISP's fault. This is traditional. If you have a DDoS, it's the transit ISP that has to deal with it. Yet you, as the enterprise organization's network, is still down. If there's a fiber cut for the transit provider, you're still down, but now the ISP still has to deal with it. But if you were now spreading that traffic out across not only transit, but peering, then you're not 100% down. Maybe you're only 30% down or 50% down, depending on what the mix is of transit versus peering traffic. So we talked about the network geek stuff, why from a geek perspective, the peering is a great thing. Let's look at it from a different perspective. The gentleman that was just up here talking about the board, right? He's on the risk part of the committee for the board. So you're looking at risk analysis. So when you're an enterprise organization looking at risk analysis, this is where an internet exchange can really come into play to help with mitigating that risk. Peering will bring you brand protection. and brand enhancement. Better customer experience. Resiliency to your enterprise network will improve. Operational costs, the cost of running the network, because on a per megabit per second, peering is cheaper than buying transit, right? Traffic redirection, isolation. If you have a problem coming in on your transit links, sure, let the transit link be the missile sponge, as we used to say in the Navy. Let them suck up all the attack. But you're peering over here, all those networks that you're peered with, you're still able to push traffic back and forth because you're not being attacked across that particular surface area. It should be a strategic decision within the organization. From a security perspective, it's not only still brand awareness and brand protection, but from a security perspective, you gain a lot as an enterprise organization for peering. You gain better security in your network. Because as I just said, if you're being attacked on a DDoS, your network that's on the peering side is probably still up and running well. Again, it's a strategic decision. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, John. I'd rather have the banks and the other enterprises buying their transit from me because that's revenue. And you're right, it is. But I would encourage you to take a slightly different spin on that. I would encourage you to help sort out how you can take those large enterprise customers you might have and help convince them to come and join LINX, come and join and interconnect at LINX. Be the fiber guy behind them that gets them that connection. Be the Ethernet virtual circuit that gets them into that connection. Be the hero that helps their network be better. And after 17 years of running my own ISP, my stickiest commercial accounts were the ones that I helped engineer something better. And I was just a small little cog in their total picture. They loved us because we gave them those good right answers to help them grow their network. Let's look at a reason why peering would have helped some folks. And I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. This is well-known public information. But let's look at a DDoS that happened across the channel here a few years ago. Teenagers suspected of crippling Dutch banks in a DDoS. This morning I went into Peering DB. Here, in this room, who does not know? Don't worry about it if you don't know, because it's a good thing. Here in this room, who does not know about peeringdb.com? If you've never heard of peeringdb.com, raise your hand. Okay, so I don't see any hands. That means one of two things. Either A, you don't want to raise your hand because you don't want to be that one person, or B, everybody in this room has heard of PeeringDB, which is a good thing, right? So PeeringDB is really cool. I went this morning to PeeringDB and I went into the search box at the top and I typed the word bank, B-A-N-K. I hit enter. How many do you think I got? Throw out a number.
Less than 10.
Less than 10, 20, 0. Pardon? 150. So basically the gambit is 0 to 150. The answer this morning was 51, 5-1. 5-1 entities showed up in PeeringDB that had the word bank in their name. Okay? How many entries do you think, organizations do you think are inside of PeeringDB? Order of magnitude more than 51? Or several, right? We moved that decimal place. So I was at a FS-ISAC meeting a few years ago when this was being talked about, right after it happened. And I asked the people in that room how many of them were peering at their favorite internet exchange in the Netherlands, Amzix. Is it okay, Kurt, if I say Amzix up here? Okay. I don't want you to shoot me, because I know this is a LINX thing, right? None of them, the answer of 0 was peering at Amzix. So the attacker purchased a DDoS for hire stressor that was running around 50 quid a week for the service, right? But what do you think the economic impact was of that attack on those banks? Probably a heck of a lot more than 50 quid a week. Probably thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of euros per week, per day, per hour, what have, on there. None of them were peering. They were all dependent on their one or two transit providers to take all of that traffic. It crippled multiple Dutch banks. None of them were connected to the IXPs. All their DDoS came across their transit links. And I asked them, I said, so why aren't you guys peering? And I got the, as we would say in the US, the deer in the headlight look. Huh? Peering? What's peering? And that really started getting me to think that enterprises really need to think about that, right? Because if I am a Dutch bank and I have my banking app on a mobile and all of my customers can't get to their money, they're probably pretty unhappy, and there's probably some bad things happening with brand awareness and brand value there. But if they were peering, there was a good chance that the traffic from their mobile device would go to the mobile operator that would go across the exchange point to the bank's infrastructure. Now, I know that mobile operators have selective peering agreements and arrangements. They want to see certain kinds of traffic flow. They want to see that you're peered in multiple locations. There's other technical and operational reasons. But I would be willing to bet you that mobile operators and banks could easily find a set of common grounds to why they should be peering at some place like LINX or AMSIX or DKIX, et cetera, around the world. Especially since their customers couldn't get to their money. I don't know about you, but if I can't get to my money, I am not a happy person. None of the banks were in peering DB that I looked up. And by the way, most of those banks, I looked them up again today, they're not in peering DB. I think that the DDoS attack would have been much less on them if they had been peering. And the answer I got from their cybersecurity people was, that's a networking thing, that's not our job. But networking and security go hand in hand today, right? As I saw a t-shirt a few months ago that says, all things evil on the internet begins with DNS. Well, all things evil on the internet require packets to be forwarded and moved around the internet. So if we can help make that better through an IX, then that would be a security implication and concern for me from a risk management perspective as well. Other examples, fiber cut. Your network is down. All your eggs are in one basket. If you have a separate fiber link going to an exchange facility or going to several exchange facilities, you can take that fiber cut and your infrastructure continues to run. You have a regional conflict. Don't know if we have any of those happening right now. I think we might somewhere here in Europe. If you have a regional conflict happening, can you still be able to deal with things in region because you have an exchange point or you have peering happening inside of that region, even though there might be a conflict nearby? Or there may be a conflict that's cutting off some of your connectivity in certain parts. So you can turn around and take the word customer, right, to connect to in-region customers, but also business partners and vendors. So now if a bank who is required or other enterprise organization is required to connect, their business partners are also at an exchange point. They may be able to pass traffic back and forth. Let's take a look at an example real quick of government. You're trying to surf to Transport for London's website. I don't know if TfL is part of LINX or not, but if they were, and there was a problem with TfL's general internet, and you were on LINX and they are on LINX, that traffic would just go across and continue to work, and you'd be able to figure out what the tube schedule was that you needed for that day. So you as the customer using TfL would be able to continue to move forward. Enterprises today are not just enterprises. They are service providers, and I think we need to work on changing that mindset. So you're an enterprise organization. What do? How do you get connected? Well, you got to get an ASN, right? We all know where to go for that over here. You go to RIPE, get an ASN, research peering DB, figure out where your exchanges are in your areas, go to the peering forums, come to a meeting like this, learn about peering, learn about the organizations, make sure your routing equipment can support it, right? Whether you're running Juniper, Cisco, MikroTik, HP, whatever, make sure the equipment can support it. definitely put yourself into peering DB so that others can find you and you can establish those relationships. And a lot of folks are now using peering DB's database for automation to automatically generate their peering session configurations on their devices. What I don't have up here, and I should have, is also make sure you have appropriate Internet Route Registry objects created and that you have RPKI set up for your prefixes and ROAs. I know there's probably some little bit of back and forth religion on whether or not RPKI is the great thing in the world to do or not, but having been somebody myself who just recently did some RPKI on prefixes I'm generally of the mindset that setting up and signing my prefixes in a hosted model is a good thing to do and has not caused me any operational issues. If you haven't done it, I would recommend it. Security, you may need to look at how your firewalls are set, right? Because your firewall has been predominantly built as a defense against transit. And so what does that world look like? You've got all the folks coming at you, but now you've got peering. So peering's coming in over here on the side. So how do you firewall, how do you do ACLs that are slightly different maybe than your policy on a publicly facing set of connectivity? Oh, here we go, I do talk about RARs. Make sure those records are up to date, right? You may also want to have a more specific set of, you want to maybe de-aggregate your prefixes and announce them out in smaller chunks to IXs than you do on transit. So play around with that a little bit. Clicky, there we go. So in general, I'm pushing, and I think that we all as a community need to push, that enterprises that are doing more customer-facing events and more customer-facing apps need to seriously look at peering. At the end of the day, for an organization like LINX, bringing more enterprises in doesn't take revenue away from the ISPs that are providing transit. It, in fact, enhances it, and it grows the pie overall. Further, from a finance risk perspective, it helps LINX have a greater distributed pool that it's working with as far as members, revenue, and all those fun things. So it's good for an exchange point operator as well. We need to up our game and bring in these folks that are running enterprises that are also really service providers in disguise. So I've hit exactly at the time, but I'll stand here for questions until you guys throw me off the stage and want to run for food. I got one question up front here, and I got a question in the back over there, and I got another question right over here in the middle, just to help the mic gents know where they're going. Yes, sir.
Right, so it's not really a question, more of a comment.
Okay.
There's lots of very unqualified oversimplifications there. I was just going to say one of the things that hopefully an enterprise's transit provider does that the enterprise wouldn't necessarily be able to do themselves is whenever something happens, like for instance they're getting some DDoS over the IX is not going to help with mitigating that. They're not going to go and clarify and classify the traffic and put in layer 4 filters for you like your transit provider most likely would do when that happens. If you're at the IX, and I mean, I've got countless tickets that I've opened with my peers saying, hey, we're getting DDoS from these IP addresses of yours. Probably less than 5% of the time I've had any response whatsoever. And if you have a transit provider, they can go out and block traffic for you. If you don't have the expertise in-house, so really what you're saying, or what people need, is to have the expertise in-house for being a transit provider themselves, if they're going to replace their transit provider with peering.
So my response to that is, one, slightly cheeky, which is, well, that's why you should use Team Cymru's DDoS mitigation service. It's free. Anyway, no, moving straight along more seriously, right? Come on, I got to pay the bill somehow, right? The more seriously, the answer there is that, yes, you're absolutely correct that an enterprise organization that now stands up and starts doing peering needs to be, instead of this tall to storm the castle, they got to be a little bit taller to storm the castle, right? They've got to have a little bit more technical expertise. This is why I was saying earlier, if you happen to be the transit provider for one of these enterprises that you help convince them to come to the IX, then to me, there is a relationship opportunity to help them better understand how to benefit from that IX connectivity and continue to help them from a technical perspective. Now, I don't know the specifics. It's been a while since I've read the LINX agreements and peering agreements, but most peering agreements I've seen over time have been, if you have a problem and you report it to him, he has a contractual obligation at a minimum to do something about it. Now, whether he does or doesn't is a completely separate issue, but there is a little bit of a stick, I think, that could be bought there that says, dude, really?
Most peers can't even keep their sessions up.
Well, yeah, that's a different issue. Yes, sir. Oh, wait, one in the back. Yep.
Yeah, Rudolf Vandenberg from the Netherlands. With regards to Dutch banks, I looked at Hurricane Electric's BGP page. I at least find 5 or 6 of our major banks listed with an AES. I looked up their routing. Most of them seem to be multi-homed. I don't know if all of them are at AMSIX, but they sometimes work under different brand names than you might expect. So we actually have a lot of private firms in the Netherlands with their own AES routing, including ones like the Dutch Tax Service, and yeah, several others who do. So I completely agree private firms should look into peering transit, having their own ASs, etc. I just think you need to rework your examples.
Be happy to do that, and I'll find you afterwards just to make sure I nail it down, because I like to make sure things are accurate. And by no means was what I looked at a scientific dig-in. I mean, just searching for certain list of banks that were in that room at that time, quickly, that's what showed up. So yeah, the more I can make things accurate, the better, or the happier I am as well.
Yeah, excuse me, my point was pretty much similar to James's, but kind of having worked at financial enterprise, they're kind of, obviously their main target is the main concentrations, the services they produce. But also with regards to things like DDoS mitigation and so on, you need to be able to cope with that and deal with that. And so they may have multiple transit providers and cloud DDoS mitigation or something like that to kind of provide that.
So they have a scrubbing service, they have one of those others, and then they're taking that traffic, running it through a scrubbing service, and it's coming back into them through a GRE tunnel or something along those lines. And I'm not trying to say that those are, people shouldn't be doing that, because security is a toolbox. It's not one silver bullet, right? It's how many different little quivers do you have that you can pull out and nail the problem with. In my own experience, when my ISP got DDoSed, I was able to basically allow that DDoS to come in through my transit providers by the way I tweak my advertisements. And coming back to this gentleman's point here, you got to be, skilled enough to understand that, but tweaking my advertisements such that the DDoS traffic for the most part came down my transit providers, and I just allowed that to fall on the floor. Whereas my peering, so my peering with Netflix and Google and Apple and LinkedIn and Facebook, all of that continued to run. And so, yeah, my customers couldn't get to some places because that was going on transit, but they could still get to their Facebook and they could still watch movies, which meant that my phone rang less from an ISP's perspective. From an enterprise perspective, you're not so much caring whether or not they've got Netflix capability, but if I could adjust my routes in such a way that the attack came across transit and let them suck that up, or soak that up rather, and then I could still maintain connectivity with my direct mobile operators or other network operators, then I go. The other piece I want to add in there is I point to the banks because banks are about money. And a lot of times when you're looking at how do you affect a change, you need to look at the dollars and cents, right? There's a theory out there right now that if I have better cybersecurity, I might be able to get better insurance rates from my insurance carrier because I'm less of a risk. I would throw into that not just only banks, but local governmental organizations, schools, universities, colleges. Universities and colleges are more likely to peer because that's coming out of the old days of the research education world. But other local governments coming in and peering, and those governmental entities, peering also is beneficial to them from a regional perspective and a regional operational perspective.
The two other points that I'd just make very quickly. So from organisations like financial organisations and so on, they may prefer a kind of service provider relationship because they've got somebody to shout at and they need to deal with the situation. And the other ones dropped out of my head.
No worries, you'll find it as soon as you hit coffee, and then you can come and find me. Anybody else has any other? We got another comment question over here.
Yeah, Dave Pumford, SGGS. Whilst there's definitely a case that there's an opportunity for enterprise peering, don't you think there's an entire educational piece missing? Because, you know, you're talking about the financial sector, but we've already seen enterprises get towards, you know, BGP with cloud interconnection, and the IXs themselves are offering you layer 3, you know, maps as an example. Like, you know, we talk about DDoS, but it's been done to death.
Right.
So we're now getting to a point where they are understanding what IP peering is. So what do you think we should do as an industry to try and educate more so they push, you know, it's moving away from just the traditional IP service to the peering services that the IXs offer?
You bring up a really great point, because the IXs are out there saying, hey, come to me because your ingest egress traffic flows for AWS is going to be lower cost coming across the peering environment. So they're pitching an economic reason why you should come, because your cloud connectivity is better, right? And so those BGP kinds of things are going to be there to be able to enable that. So to your question about education, honestly, I think it's a ripe opportunity for IXs and regional players to put together training and education and outreach into those communities. And I think that by doing that, all we do is up the game of the entire industry, right? I'd rather talk to a bank or another enterprise organization, not just to pick on banks, but I'd rather talk to an enterprise organization where their networking folks, pardon the slight sarcasm here, knows how to spell BGP, right? If they do and they understand it and they understand how it works and why we care and the things we need to tweak, that makes that conversation and that dialogue a whole heck of a lot better.
Yeah, enterprises are definitely getting smarter. There's no doubt about that. And we're seeing that a lot more. You know, it's just how do we, as an industry, try and bring them together to take more IP services, not just transit. That's the main thing that I'm trying to figure out. I
would send invitations out to enterprise organizations where things like peering forums, global peering forum, you know, peering forum in Bulgaria here in a few weeks, and Sophie, other places where these events happen, is send out invites to the CISOs and others in those organizations in that region and invite them to come. And you know, myself being an educator, if you guys are looking for help on that, I'm happy to help work on what does that look like, how does that get pushed out there, et cetera.
But there's more of a responsibility to the IXs as well. You know, if we're trying to help their services, that's my point. Cheers, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, or please get the heck off the stage so I can get to my coffee. If you want Team Cymru stickers, I have a whole bunch of them. If you put them on your laptop, it protects your laptop.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
Thank you.